Okay, good morning. We're going to do a whistle-top tour through Grenfell. You probably all know about it. Fire on the 4th floor, fridge freezer caught fire. Single staircase building. Oddly, no alarm, but then it is owned by the council, even though it's traded out to a housing association. It's in Kensington and Chelsea, which you all imagine to be lovely, but this is West Lancaster Gate in Shepherd's Bush, and you wouldn't want to walk around there during the evening or park your car there. Okay, so it's not the greatest of areas. Lots of complaints by tenants about mattresses dumped in the corridors and some of the fire doors not able to be closed once people have kicked them in. Lots of subletting, so difficult building to manage, difficult situation. I had a stay put policy, which is normal in a high-rise building. So the concern is if we've got a very tall building, that if everybody tries to escape at once, the people who are on the fire floor can't actually get out because the staircases are already blocked with everybody else. So in a stay put policy, we evacuate the fire floor, the floor below and 2 above. And if the compartmentation works and the fire doesn't spread, then everybody should be okay, and it enables the people at most risk to get out first. We normally control that with the alarm. There is no alarm at Grenfell, so people were finding out their building was on fire because their friends were texting them because they'd seen it or they'd seen it on the news. Okay? So we've got poorly managed building, not a lot of expenditure. There was an active group called the Grenfell Action Group who were campaigning for improved fire safety in the premises. The housing association's reaction to that was to serve notice on them for harassment and threaten them with legal action if they continued to campaign. Okay. At the time of the fire, there was an acted prohibition notice by the fire brigade who'd asked them to do certain improvements which hadn't been done, and that was post-refurbishment. Okay. So we've got tricky building, tricky situation, unusual circumstances. The only good thing out of this is that, as chaos theory goes, it wasn't one thing that went wrong, it was lots of things. Okay. Building was like that before it was refurbed, typical old concrete 1970s building. It's cold because it's just concrete panels on the outside, single glazed windows. So the idea was to reclad it, add insulation, and at the same time they decided to put heating independently into each flat. They had a partnering contractor, which was Leadbitter. They worked out 11.278 million. They were going to do it with aluminium composite panels, which had an aluminium honeycomb inside. The winning contractor, Ride-On, worked with Harley Facades, and they came up with a sandwich, which was 2 thin skins of aluminium with insulation in between, laid over another layer of insulation. Sorry. Okay, there was gas in Grenfell Tower, and one of the first projects I worked on was removing gas from a high-rise building, because after Ronan Point, which some of you might be old enough to remember, there was a gas explosion on somebody's gas stove and it fell down like a pack of dominoes. Fortunately, it was brand new, so there weren't many people in occupation, but gas heating was generally removed from high-rise buildings as a result of that. Okay, the Griffiths inquiry changed the building regulations, and this type of building had to be more robust, so it wouldn't fall down like dominoes if some walls were blown out, and generally we took the gas out of the building. Because Grenfell was built 6 years later, they did put gas into it, but only into the basement, and then they had some communal boilers that served a communal heating system. Very expensive to run, unreliable, so someone made the decision at the refurb in 2014 that they put individual gas boilers into every flat. Okay. So we've now got a building that's had Wi-Fi introduced, internet, gas pipes, so there'll be lots of holes in the compartmentation, which is one of the reasons the fire spread. Now, if we're in a high-rise building, we're in this building, if we're on the 5th floor and there's a fire on the 1st floor, how quickly would you like to think they'd turn the gas off? Minutes? An hour? 5 minutes? Okay, soon as possible, yes? Okay. At Grenfell, it took 21 hours to turn the gas off. Okay. Gas board turned up, spoke to a fireman, went and sat in their van. 4 hours later, the gas engineer saw it on the telly and drove to the site. They said the stuff inside wasn't theirs, so they couldn't turn the valves off in the basement. They're only the supplier. By this time, there's falling debris on the isolation valves outside, so they decided to dig up holes in the road. Took them until midday, so we're 12 hours on before they even decided that. Then they called in the equipment. The gas emergency response time is 6 hours, so some of it didn't arrive till much later in the day, and the gas was eventually turned off at 11:50 the next evening. So 21 hours between the fire and the gas being turned off. Okay. By 2 o'clock, the fire brigade were reporting gas explosions in the building. Asked the gas board if they could go into the basement and turn it off, and somebody on the end of a telephone in the gas office said under health and safety it was too dangerous. So the gas stayed on through most of the fire. Okay. So our materials, we've got 3 materials. We're putting Celotex onto the concrete, which is a polyisocyanate insulation, and then we're fixing over that an aluminium composite panel that's got Kingspan K15, some of you may know it as Cool Therm in the middle, and 2 skins of thin aluminium. Okay. Over 18 metres, materials have to be effectively non-combustible, of limited combustibility. We do a test for that to see if they catch fire and whether they propagate fire under BS 8414, and it's basically a 45-minute test. Okay. Celotex got their material to pass the test by putting 15 millimetres of mineral fireline board and 6 millimetres of magnesium oxide between the fire in the test and the panel. Okay. So the panel didn't actually see any fire for the first 30 minutes of the 45-minute test. Okay. And that was the way in which it achieved its certification. So the test was fudged. The BRE say we just test what the client asks us to. The mineral board and the magnesium oxide weren't incorporated in the design, so we've got a very flammable material. Not many people at Celotex even knew about that, and in the public inquiry there's an email which the sales lady's got, who's the main product manager for this material, and when she eventually finds out that there's this magnesium oxide in this mineral board, she writes WTF on her email, because she was shocked by it. Okay. The other material we're using is Kingspan K15 insulation inside this aluminium core. What used to be called Cool Therm, tested in 2002 behind a rendered finish. So they actually rendered the sand cement protection on it, and it passed the test, because what you're putting the flames to is the sand and cement, which is non-combustible. So the panel is protected. Okay. They subsequently acquired a company called Kesteren in Belgium, who made a similar board, and all of the Kingspan product then became the Kesteren product, and they advertised it as new Kesteren technology, better insulation, better performance. Okay. In actual fact, it's got more plastic and more holes in it, so it burns more quickly. Okay. The original British product had a solid tin foil on it, and the tin foil helps reflect the heat and keeps the fire off the panel. The Kesteren product had a perforated foil on, and obviously if it's perforated the heat gets through. So we're working on a test for a material that we no longer make that was protected by render. In Grenfell there's no render protecting it. Okay? It's just inside the aluminium. So we've got another fudge test. Kingspan wanted to get it retested, but it was expensive. It's 10 grand a test. They asked the cladders if they were interested in sponsoring some tests. The cladders said, well, we're getting it approved by the local authorities anyway, so why should we bother? So nobody retested. So Grenfell's got Kesteren boards, perforated foil, no cement board protection. So again, we've got another flammable material which shouldn't be where it is. Okay. When they did eventually test the Kesteren board in 2007, the test was shut down after 17 minutes because the BRE were concerned it was going to set fire to the laboratory. Okay. Okay, so it gives you an indication, but that was never published. The published material, you start with a big, a BRE test is like this. It was then truncated to 24 pages, and then what you got, if you asked as a designer or as a building control officer, can we have the test certificate for it, what you got was a truncated 4-page thing that says pass. Okay. The photos of the mineral board and the render have all disappeared. It just says this material can pass. Okay, so the whole thing was a bit of a cover-up. So we then put this Kingspan material, which isn't as good as we think it is, inside some aluminium. The aluminium manufacturers in Germany and Belgium, they say they know nothing about British building regulations, they just supply what they're told. They supply Renault board, it's called, which is the insulation inside the aluminium. They supply it to Europe, and it's called Renault board FR, because the core is fire resistant, but apparently the British market doesn't require the fire resistance. And as far as they're concerned, the economics demanded that they supply the cheaper material to the UK, so that's what they did. So we're not sure whether their tests were done on FR and they actually supplied us with PE, which hasn't got the fire resistance. So we've got more plastic in it than the better one. Somehow they got BBA certification, no one's quite sure how. They did it based on a European test in which it achieved class 2, and yet they claimed that was equal to a UK class O, but it isn't. It should have been a class O in Europe and a class O here. Okay. So we've got a fudge test. The product sales manager was told never to release the information to customers, and when she asked at one stage if she could, her managing director wrote back, and in big letters on his email it says, "Oh my Lord, never give that information to anybody." So again, we've got hidden information. Okay. How did it all get approved? We now have a type approval system, so you can submit a scheme to NHBC or LABC and they'll give you a type approval. You pay for that. At the renewal, there's a whole string of emails where somebody who clearly could see that this didn't sit right was asking lots of strings of questions. And at the end of that string of emails, and it's purely conjecture on my part, he sends an email that says, "I've been told to ask you if you want a certificate, and if you do, it's £210,000 or thereabouts." Yeah. And I don't know about you, but if you receive an email, if you send an email saying, "I've been told," that means it's not your opinion, doesn't it? It means you've been told to do it. Okay, so that's how it got its recertification. They were the companies, because they knew, and sometimes they didn't know, because it had been done so long ago that everybody had moved on, that their tests were fudged, were very slow to release any information. BBA, are private funded, BRE are private funded, building control are now private funded. So everybody's got a commercial interest in getting these things done. Okay, there's no oversight from somebody who hasn't got a commercial link. Okay, so what's that done for us? Well, we've lost 72 people, which is terrible. So a lot of bereavement. Designers are having to pay more for their PI. And, Michael from Pangella is going to tell us a little bit more about that in a moment. PI now often excludes cladding and swimming pools and asbestos and basements, so we're seeing more and more exclusions from designers. Professional indemnity insurance. Surveyors, valuers are being told to zero value apartments. So if you've got, anecdotally in Ocean Village, the tall block, which is over 18 metres and is going to get government grant aid, this year's service charge, the flat owners are getting about £3,500, and that's to pay from the consultancy to get the grant approved. In the lower block, which is under 18 metres with no grant approval, they've just been billed £35,000. Most of these people are young, first-time buyers in a modern flat in the city. They might have equity in the property, but because it's now zero valuation, and that's instructions of the RICS and the valuers insurers, they can't borrow against it to pay for the repairs. So something's going to have to give somewhere to make that work. Lenders are also demanding EWS 1 certificates, which is the certificate to say you've got cladding and it's non-flammable, even on buildings that aren't clad. So quite often people in 3-storey buildings are being asked for an EWS certificate when they're trying to move. The freeholders or the management committee then say, well, this is quite expensive and we don't actually need one because we haven't got any cladding, but unless you've got the certificate, then the building societies are playing safe and won't lend. Grant aid's only for over 18 metres. It's only for cladding. So if you take the cladding off and find lots of other problems, the windows keep falling out at Ocean Village. Those things aren't covered under the government grant for repairs. Generally, these things are built by joint venture companies, so someone sets up, a contractor, developer will set up a business which builds a building and then is liquidated, so there's nobody to chase. Okay? Consequently, flat values are depressed. The other final difficulty is that you only get grant aid once you've started work, which is why you see so many buildings with the cladding stripped off, and they're now waiting for the grant aid to get them reclad. Okay? If you're a housing association and you give a job to a contractor, he doesn't say, can you pay? He knows he's going to get paid. If you're a bunch of private individuals in a block of flats saying to the contractor, can you start work on this £7.5 million scheme to reclad? He's saying, have you got the money? So he won't start until he knows the money's in place, and they can't get the money in place. So again, the lower blocks are in deep trouble. Michael's going to talk to you a little about insurance. Yep. I'll hand it over.